From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
Thanks very much, Ollie Barrett. Welcome to the programme. Another damp and very cold day in the great city of Manchester. Hope you've had a good Thursday. It is the 20th, I nearly said 21st, the 20th of December 2018. I've got an interesting programme for you. Welcome to it.
Welcome back to the most listened to independent radio show in Europe. It's your Richie Allen Show. It's the Richie Allen Show. Broadcasting live on richieallen.co.uk and multiple platforms around the world. And now, here's your host, Richie Allen.
And it's going to be a good one. It's just you and me today. I've got a news roundup for you like no other. Beavering away. Got back to the studio around about 3 p.m. this afternoon, having had a crazy old day, trying to do one or two bits and bobs before Christmas, but also had to spend a couple of hours in the garage where my car was being mended, where it's been for the last week. Managed to pick it up today. So I came in today, thought I was going to do some sort of music show, but I've been working like a madman for the last 90 minutes, and I've put together, I think, a very interesting hour of news and analysis. And as always, if you'd like to join in, you can do so through the medium of Twitter. My Twitter handle for new listeners only is @Richie Allen Show. Of course, I don't mean that new listeners only should tweet me. I mean, my regular listeners know the Twitter handle. It's @Richie Allen Show. Tweet me, tell me what you're thinking today. All right. There you are. All right. Yeah, it's been one of those days, hasn't it? You know, when you don't have a car, and I lived in London, didn't want a car, didn't put one on the road, didn't need one. Came up here back in 2014, and for quite a while didn't have a car, didn't need one, didn't feel like I missed it at all. You know, had obviously driven previously, had not driven towards the end of my time in Spain, hadn't driven in the UK. It was poverty, really, towards the end of my time in Spain, that I couldn't keep a car on the road. Got used to not having one. But then back in 2016, of course, I bought an old car, an old station wagon. I started driving again just to take drives into the countryside and towards the coast at weekends. And then you don't have it for a few days and you go absolutely ape spit, don't you? You absolutely panic. It's amazing. When you don't have it, you don't need it. When you do have it and then you lose it for a few days, you absolutely go into kind of chaos mode, or at least I did anyway. There you go. I'm not one for driving a lot, but I do like, you know, if I have to go somewhere. Because when I run, I come back to the house, I get ready, start doing some work for the show. But sometimes I need to pop out to a shop or something, and it's great to have the car. Anyway, look, yeah. I know you didn't come on here to hear that today, but it's been one of those days. What a big story this drone story is. What drone story? You might well cry, because, well, you might have been working all day yourself. Big story about drones at Gatwick Airport. Here's Kay Burley.
A very good afternoon to you. The Army has been called in to help at Gatwick Airport as tens of thousands of passengers who'd been hoping to make a pre-Christmas getaway have had their plans ruined. All flights have been cancelled to and from the airport following reports of drones flying close to the runway. Flights were suspended yesterday evening last night after 2 drones were spotted near the airfield. A further sighting was made in the early hours of this morning, while this afternoon another drone was spotted close to the runway. 110,000 people expected to have been affected by today's disruption. The Army now being brought in to assist with the operation to find the drones.
The Army?
2,000 people unable to fly out of the airport last night. Another 2,000 unable to return to Gatwick yesterday, while a further 6,000 were diverted to other airports. 760 flights were scheduled to arrive and depart from Gatwick today, meaning that potentially 110,000 people could be affected.
Wow. God love them, by the way. Must be dreadful for people that are going to meet their families, their parents overseas maybe, or their children overseas. Horrible thing. Tens of thousands of passengers disrupted by these drones. The latest is, as I was coming on here, Gatwick closed for the moment. They're not giving any speculative time when they expect flights to take off and land there again. been shut since last night. Sussex police saying it isn't terror-related, but a deliberate act of disruption using industrial specification drones. Industrial specification drones, deliberate act of disruption. How could they not identify the people using the drones by this stage? I might talk about that in a minute. Massive disruption. And the Gatwick even Chief Operating Officer Chris Woodruff said the public, or the police and the army, are looking for the operator. That is the way to disable the drone. He said the police could not shoot down these devices because of the risk from stray bullets. Nothing happening, no flights, very strange. It's taken so long to deal with it, and they've drafted in the army. Should we be suspicious? I think we should. Here's UK Defence Secretary Gavin Williamson on drafting in the army. This is him speaking a very short time ago.
So Sussex Police have requested assistance and support from the armed forces, and we'll be deploying the armed forces to give them the help that they need to be able to deal with the situation of the drones at Gatwick Airport. And it goes to demonstrate how our armed forces are able to open the airport at the earliest possible opportunity.
The army. Before we talk about the army and what's going on here and what might be going on here, what are the rules governing even? I've lost the ability to articulate. Put your teeth in. What are the rules governing the usage of drones? If you want to get a drone, what are the rules? Kate Burley's amazing.
So what are the current rules around flying drones? Well, you're required to keep your drone in sight at all times. There you go. The drone must be flown at least 50 metres away from people or property. It's against the law to fly a drone above 120 metres, also against the law to fly a drone within a kilometre of an airport. And if a drone endangers the safety of an aircraft, that is a criminal offence, which could result in a prison sentence of up to 5 years.
Up to 5 years, right? What might be going on? Sure, look, let's throw a conspiracy theory into the mix then. I went for a walk this afternoon after I got back, just before I started working on this show, briefly to let the dog do the dog's business, as the dogs need to do, as you know. And I met my mate Michael Cohen. Michael is a security expert. Very smart man, very savvy. And he said to me, Richie, he said, I'm not saying this is true now, he said, because I don't know, but who benefits? He said, consider the possibility that this is some false flag of sorts. I said, go on, Michael, go on, son, what do you mean? Well, he said, imagine that somebody or some bodies want to get rid of drones and to stop the public using drones because of what the public might inadvertently capture using their drones. And I thought, you're a cute whore, Michael. Very smart, I thought. Michael said to me, Richie, these drones, they are becoming more and more popular. Their growth is explosive in terms of people buying them. He's right. It is an explosion in private citizens buying these things. Imagine, says Michael. He said, Richie, you talk about false flag terrorism on your show, said Michael. I said, I do. He said, imagine how difficult it might become for people to murder innocent people in a false flag attack, to be blamed on Islamic jihadists. It becomes more difficult, he said, if everybody's flying their own private drones. God knows what those drones might pick up. I thought, yeah, you might be right there, Michael, old son. I said to him, and I think he's asked a brilliant question. These drones, as some of my listeners are telling me now through Twitter, must have tracking technology. It must be easy to track down the location of the drone and also electronically discover where it is being piloted from. This is all done electronically. Drones are flown by remote control. It must be easy-ish with the technology available today to find out who's the culprit for stopping air traffic at Gatwick. Yet they haven't a clue, they're telling us. Do we believe them? Is my pal Michael onto something? I think he bloody well might be. I think it's an excellent hypothesis as to why this crazy story might be happening right now, inconveniencing thousands of people. driving people mad. And today, on UK radio, which I was listening to on my travels around town today, on UK radio, there were a number of people advocating banning the use of drones by Joe Public. Yes, there were quite a few. Now, to be honest, there were others who were saying on national television and radio today, well, that's a gross violation of our civil liberties. You shouldn't do that. To be fair to the BBC. But there were plenty of people on there saying they should be banned. Take them away from the public. Why? Because as the use of drones grows, and as we become, more and more reliant on filming things with our phones, which I don't like, by the way. I don't like being filmed personally. I've had this out with you before. Let's not get into it again. But people flying drones around cities and around towns, the establishment mightn't like that. God knows what they might film. I think Michael is onto something there, my mate Michael Cohen. Do tweet me. It's at Richie Allen Show on Twitter. At Richie Allen Show on Twitter. A military exercise, just Sean is saying on Twitter. How you doing, Sean? Tristan Vertigo. How you doing, Tristan? He says, Richie, I fly drones for a living. You'd be surprised how many idiots fly close to airports and give responsible drone pilots a bad name. Tristan, I have no doubt, my friend. You are right. I'm sure there are lots of morons who are using drones near airports. They are very dangerous. That's very good, mate. You are right to say that. Now, I understand there is a 1 kilometre exclusion zone around airports. I was speaking to Michael about this today. Both of us thought the 1 kilometre exclusion zone maybe wasn't enough. That's very close, isn't it? I mean, I run 7 kilometres now on a daily basis. I'm not breaking any records, by the way. I jog, stroke, run. And a kilometre is not that long a distance. I thought a kilometre was very close to the airports. Tristan, you're right. There has to be common sense and there has to be something done about it. But this might not be some fool flying near an airport. This might be something more sinister. Andy tweets, the drone theory sounds reasonable to me. And Paul tweets, nothing quite like the monotone voice of Kay Burley delivering the word drone. I said that today, Paul. A drone talking about drones was what I said to myself when I was watching this. Faisal tweets, what the hell did the police mean by stray bullets? Surely a shotgun is the thing for taking down a nuisance drone. Well, depending how high up the drone is, I suppose. Shotgun wouldn't be any good if the drone was flying above the allowed, requisite altitude, right? Which is 100 metres, is it? Or is it 150 metres? Tristan, tell me, my friend. I've been researching this today, but I think it might be 150 metres. But if it was flying any higher than that, Faisal, shotgun might not take it down. Might not. Particularly in the dark. I don't know. What do I know? In This Together tweets, presumably the drone is controlled by a signal. Are they claiming they can't triangulate a signal? Seems to me they are getting us all used to the army being rapidly deployed for civil policing matters. Very good. Very good. Tez Howell says, it's not me with my drone, Richie. Mine can fly up to 1.5 kilometres out, so good luck finding them, he says. Says Tez. Thanks, Tez. Appreciate that. It's at Richie Allen Show on Twitter. At Richie Allen Show. Ian tweets, Richie, I thought the same. This will restrict the use of drones that much. It'll be pointless having one. That, as my mate Michael said, might very well be the thing. It might very well be the thing. Limit the use of drones by people like you and like me, lest we film something they don't want us filming. Yeah, that's what I thought. When Michael said it, I thought, very good. Very good, I said, Michael. 16 minutes past the hour. We're going to talk about Donald Trump and Syria in a minute. My name is Richie Allen. How you doing? It's December 20th, 2018. This is the Eagles and Take It Easy on your Richie Allen Show. Welcome to it. Eagles will be in Manchester this coming May. Guess who'll be there? Guess who'll be there? Watching the Eagles. Love the Eagles, me. Love the Eagles. 20 minutes past the hour. The drone story is mad. It's madness that it's taken them this long. The best part of 18 hours. They haven't a clue. The army has been drafted in. It's dreadful. More and more people tweeting me that they think Michael is on the ball. That this is some sort of operation to come at those who use drones for themselves. Ban the drones. Because while drones are a nuisance, and the idea that Amazon and companies will deliver things with drones, and while we should be very worried about surveillance issues around drones, yes, they could also be as a tool in the hands of the awakened, especially around big public events and things like that. They could be very good, especially when the mainstream media starts lying about things that happened at a protest, maybe a fracking protest. You know, the media refuses to report on some old lady getting the shit kicked out of her by a policeman or a policewoman at a fracking demonstration. Drones are marvellous because, well, you can disprove or you can contradict the official narrative if you've had your drone in the area. This stinks, as my friend said, of something that is a setup. It's got to be something like that. And again, you know, I've flown around a bit. I know you've probably flown around a bit. I lived in Spain. We used to come backwards and forwards. People who are going to see their family this weekend and for Christmas, what a kick in the teeth this is. It's an absolute mess. But it's fairly sinister. 22 minutes past the hour. Let's move on. Very interesting stories. I want to talk about that horrendous story that I came across overnight about the Scandinavian ladies who were murdered in Morocco. I'm going to talk about that in a few minutes, and I've got some interesting audio on that there. But what about Donald Trump, eh? And the report that he's ordered a full and rapid withdrawal of US troops in Syria. There are 2,000 US troops in Syria. Trump has declared victory over the Islamic State, and he said, well, we're pulling out, apparently taking his own advisors by surprise. The Pentagon and the State Department were scrambling, according to the BBC, to interpret an abrupt change in course from the US policy. Now, this policy to stay in Syria was decided over the summer with the blessing of Donald Trump. So this is all very strange. This policy to keep forces in Syria, as was agreed back in the summer. Senior officials were informed of Trump's U-turn on Tuesday. And then, of course, it came out last night that it was going to happen because Trump tweeted, "We have defeated ISIS in Syria. My only reason for being there during the Trump presidency." This is monumental bollocks. This is bollocks that the likes of which I've never encountered. Trump has had nothing to do with defeating ISIS. Nothing. The intelligence agencies of his country and the neocon Zionists that own him and that operate him have funneled everything that the jihadists have ever needed or wanted to keep them in the game. The United States Army has not been fighting jihadists in Syria. They have not. Don't believe it for a minute. So this is what's happened then. Trump's been tweeting about this, and a number of Republicans, including the Lindsey Graham, who's a caricature, you know, warmongering madman Lindsey Graham, has been saying it's a bad idea. Sky News' Dominic Waghorn provides analysis of what's happened for Kay Burley today. This is Dominic Waghorn analysing what has happened. This is late this afternoon.
Well, inside America, even within the Trump administration and amongst allies, people have been really taken by surprise by this. Not so much the fact that Trump did it, but the way he did it and the explanation he's given for it. Now, this, as you were saying, he's tweeted this morning in defence of all that criticism. Does the USA, he says, want to be the policeman of the Middle East, getting nothing but spending precious lives and trillions of dollars protecting others who, in almost all cases, do not appreciate what we are doing? Do we want to be there forever? Time for others to finally fight. Now, the point about this is it's no huge surprise that he's done this. He obviously campaigned saying it's time to bring the troops home from these wars he doesn't believe are worth fighting. But it's his insistence that IS has been beaten that most people are taking huge issue with. Republicans on Capitol Hill, those within his administration, and we've heard from people like Tobias Ellwood, junior minister in the government here, and the big bombshell that's dropped today is that US officials say not only are troops being pulled out of northeast Syria, but airstrikes are likely to stop as well. The only person who's expressed sort of appreciation of what Trump has done, it may not surprise you to hear, is Vladimir Putin.
Right.
He seems delighted by this, and he got 2 early Christmas presents yesterday. He had this announcement from Trump. He also had the announcement that one of his buddies, the oligarch Oleg Deripaska, has been taken off a sanctions list. A huge amount of speculation as to why Trump has done both of those things on the same day. But listen to Vladimir Putin, being rather disingenuous, saying he likes the idea of Trump pulling troops out of Syria, but does Trump really mean it?
As for the withdrawal of US forces, I don't know what that is. How long has the US been in Afghanistan? 17 years. They've been saying practically every year that their troops will be withdrawn. They're still there. Is the American troops' presence necessary? No, I don't think it is necessary.
Putin makes a very good point. This has been promised before and it hasn't materialised. And Trump is a liar. You know, like May, like Corbyn, like Clinton. He's a pathological liar. An acute narcissist who hasn't a clue really what's going on. Burley and Waghorn couldn't avoid sneering at Putin there, could they? They couldn't even hide their bias. Objectivity, take it out of the Sky News SOP manual. No need for it anymore. The word objectivity gone out the window. Disgraceful for presenters to be sneering at and editorialising in that way. Stay out of it. Play the Putin clip without prefacing it with stupid remarks. Just play the bloody clip. Apparently Putin weighed in on the Brexit saga too. Cue more sarcasm from Waghorn and the Ginger Ninja.
Meanwhile, as part of that news conference, he's also been talking about Brexit and a second referendum, hasn't he, here in the United Kingdom?
Yeah, he has. And we used to these annual press conferences, aren't we? They're kind of annual pantomime, really, where the Russian president listens to hours and hours of questions, talks this time only for 3.5 hours. So we've had him talking for over 5 hours in the past, and we have people trying to get his attention with these big banners and with crazy hairstyles and crazy hats, trying to get his attention, and he answers them one by one. He was asked about Brexit, inevitably, and he came down on the side of Brexiteers, said that surely this is a vote that's happened and needs to be followed through on. So Theresa May getting, I think, what's probably unwelcome support from Vladimir Putin. Was it not a referendum, the Russian president says? Someone disliked the results, so repeated over and over, talking about a second referendum. He said, is that democracy? What then would be the point of the referendum in the first place? So Vladimir Putin setting himself up as an expert on democracy there, saying a second referendum is not a good idea, which I suppose those supporters of a second referendum would probably welcome support from that quarter from Vladimir Putin. Yeah,
Putin setting himself up as an expert on democracy. Fanar, eh? Dominic Waghorn. Imagine it. Imagine how low journalism has sunk when you have presenters and reporters like that. The United States is not pulling out of Syria, and don't believe for a minute it will. Trump supporters will triumphantly bleat and crow tonight that, well, look, Donald is doing what he said he would do. No, he isn't. I think what they will do is they'll appear to pull back while using their proxies to carry on arming the nutters and trying to undermine the Assad government. Remember, Trump has dropped more bombs in the Middle East than any of his predecessors. Think about that. You know, he's ripped up the Iranian nuclear deal at the behest of Israel. He's a liar. He's probably insane, Donald Trump. Clinically, if you got a genuine, a reputable psychiatrist to evaluate Trump, he's probably totally and utterly insane. Doesn't have a clue what's going on. This is not the US wiping its hands of Syria. It isn't. It's just a change of strategy. Maybe Turkey will start taking over some of the heavy lifting there. Remember, the plan for the region was fomented decades ago, and I've played this clip before but not recently. You will remember US General Wesley Clark after September the 11th, he was at the Pentagon only a few days after September the 11th, and he saw the plans for the region. Remember this?
About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the joint staff who used to work for me, and one of the generals called me and he said, "Sir, you got to come in. You got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, "No." He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, we're going to war with Iraq. Why? He said, I don't know. He said, I guess they don't know what else to do. So I said, well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda? He said, no. He says, there's nothing new that way. They just made the decision to go to war with Iraq. He said, I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we've got a good military and we can take down governments. And he said, I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail. So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, are we still going to war with Iraq? And he said, oh, it's worse than that. He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, he said, I just got this down from upstairs, meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, this is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran.
Yeah. All right, didn't happen in 5 years, but they're getting there. That was Wesley Clark speaking with Democracy Now! Some years ago. Don't believe that Donald Trump is fulfilling a promise that he made before the election 2 years ago. He isn't. He's not. And that's about the end of it, really. Nothing will change there. Hey, as for Brexit and Putin and Brexit and all of that, Work and Pensions Secretary Amber Rudd, the latest woman, or the latest person, the latest captain, she's the latest captain of the project to fuck the poorest people in the country in the arse. Because if you're Work and Pensions Secretary, that is your brief. How best can you screw the worst off in society? Well, anyway, she told ITV News today that if Theresa May cannot get her deal through Parliament, this is the deal she agreed with the European Union. Now, May cannot get it through Parliament. Amber Rudd said, yes, we might well, in that scenario, we might well have a second referendum.
I have said that I don't want a people's vote or a referendum in general, but if Parliament absolutely failed to reach a consensus, I can see there would be a plausible argument for it. But I think it is incumbent on MPs to find the centre ground in Parliament and to try to find where the majority is there. Because quite frankly, I don't think the majority of people, let alone Brenda, want to be asked again how to vote.
Yeah, Brenda.
What kind of fuckery is this?
Well, it's fuckery. What it is now you've got senior cabinet ministers and secretaries of state saying, yeah, if May doesn't get it through, well, obviously you've got to consider a second referendum. Right? Forget about the fact that the MPs are supposed to implement the decision of the people, whom 2.5 years ago said, let's leave. Let's leave properly. No, the MPs don't agree amongst themselves. Forget the 17.8 whatever it was million people who said leave. So in the event they can't get it through Parliament, which they won't, why don't we have a second referendum? Everybody, including Jeremy Corbyn, one of the greatest traitors that ever lived, ever, to the British people. Mr. The EU is a terrible thing for his entire backbench career, and now doesn't want to leave with no deal and wants to come to some arrangement with the European Union. They're all saying no deal, it's a terrible thing, it can't happen. It's a terrible thing, can't happen. Let's hear from Janice Atkinson, who is a European, she's an MEP, a member of the European Parliament. She's an independent MEP, Janice Atkinson, and she succinctly explains why leaving with no deal is a positive thing.
Well, it's the language that you use. Why is it chaos if we exit without a deal? We just go to World Trade Organization rules. That's not a problem. But, you know, the mainstream media talk about the horror of a no-deal Brexit, crashing out of the EU. It's not. It's an option that's on the table, and under government legislation, if we don't have a deal in the next few weeks, then we just leave under World Trade Organization rules, and there is no problem with that. The problem is, in Westminster, is that we have too many MPs and MEPs standing behind cameras, going on radio, just arguing amongst themselves, not listening to what the voters want. We've got a Remain Prime Minister, we've got a Remain opposition, and we've got Remain MPs in the House of Westminster. They were given a clear mandate by the people to leave, and we knew exactly what we were voting for, and that is leaving without a deal if that comes down to it. But, you know, I'm in Brussels now, broadcasting to you. They really don't get and understand the Brussels brinkmanship that takes place here. Of course it goes to the wire, and we should hold their feet to the wire as well. We've got 100 days to work this out, because this lot will cave in, because they need us more than we need them.
It's a simple fact. It isn't a simplistic summing up. It is a fact. It isn't simplistic. It's a fact. They need the UK more than the UK needs them. You basically stare them down and you wait for them to blink first, as the pressure would mount on them from the massive conglomerates in Europe, who would be terrified of any suggestion that the UK would be punished with tariffs. So you just stare them down and wait them out. But nobody wants to leave, you see. Well, the country does. But these people are Europhiles, they are Euro whores, they are Zionist whores, let's be honest about it, and they are doing what it is they are being told to do to prevent us from leaving. And we're going to leave Brexit now because you're sick of it. And we're probably not going to talk about it again till the new year. Patricia, on the Donald Trump story, says the only reason Trump would pull troops out is because he wants the US to move in and rebuild what they have destroyed. If it happens, it's about money. Anyone who actually believes it's for a good reason is delusional, says Patricia. Yes, of course. Well, Patricia, to be fair, they would also need private contractors like Blackwater, private military firms, to stay in the country to oversee those rebuilding projects as well. That's further down the road, of course, because the Assad government is in a very strong position at the moment. Well, it's in an incredibly strong position at the moment. So it is. It is exactly 23 minutes to the top of the hour. We're going to talk about that horrible story that came out of Morocco overnight on your Richie Allen Show, live on Fab Radio 2, TuneIn Radio, triggerwarning.tv and richieallen.co.uk. We'll talk about that story, and we'll talk about the cashless society when we return after some Dolly. Bit of Dolly, eh? Why not? This is 9 to 5 on the Richie Allen Show. Keep those tweets coming in, by the way. Dolly Parton, 9 to 5 on the Richie Allen Show. Let's move on, because there's plenty I need to get through before the top of the hour. This is some horrendous story. I can't find any other adjective to describe it. Reading from the BBC reports the bestial murder of 2 young women in Morocco is being investigated as a terrorism attack, according to Danish Prime Minister Lars Løkke Rasmussen. 3 men were arrested today over the murder of Louisa Jespersen, who's from Denmark, and Maren Juland, who's from Norway. The women were found dead from knife wounds near a popular tourist spot, incredibly, on Monday. At least one of the suspects has been linked to an Islamist extremist group. One person had already been arrested on Monday, hours after the bodies of the 2 women were discovered with injuries to their necks. Police also supplied photographs of the 3 other suspects, which prompted a 72-hour manhunt. And the news outlet 2M in Morocco said the men were shepherds and had been arrested in the city of Marrakesh on Thursday morning. That's today, of course. After the Prime Minister's statement, Denmark's intelligence agency PET said it was investigating a video circulating online which appeared to show one of the 2 women being murdered. Now, this is horrendous. There is a video circulating online. I haven't watched it. I have seen over the years 1 or 2 of these videos, and they are so sickening, they are so nauseating, they are so gut-wrenching. I can't watch them. But there is a video circulating online, and it appears that it is footage of the decapitation of one of these women while she was alive. This is fucking sick stuff, this. John Sparks is a Sky News reporter, and he's based in Morocco, and he sent this report back to Sky today.
It's absolutely horrible, this case. We've been getting new information about these brutal murders through the day from Scandinavia and Morocco as well. The Danish Prime Minister, he held a press conference this morning where he confirmed the identities of these 2 women. 24-year-old Louisa Vesterraga Jespersen of Denmark, who we saw in the introduction there, and 28-year-old Maren Juland from Norway. They were both students at the University University of Southeastern Norway. They were doing an outdoor recreation course, and they were on a 1-month expedition. But that was a trip, the Danish Prime Minister said, that turned into a nightmare. The women's bodies were found on Monday at an isolated camping spot that was popular with hikers near the highest mountain in the region. They were actually found by 2 French women, hikers themselves, who were so shocked by what they found that they immediately went down the mountain to tell the authorities. The authorities then reported that the 2 victims had been killed with a knife or knives, and that one of the women had been beheaded. And I can tell you that there is a video, a gruesome video being circulated online showing the beheading of one of these women. It's particularly unpleasant, and that video has been authenticated by the Danish intelligence service. As for the Moroccan authorities themselves, they've made 4 arrests. They actually made 3 arrests this morning. They pulled 3 men off a bus that was heading to the coast to a place called Agadir. Those men had knives on them, and they've arrested another man who has pre-established links to a militant group. The Moroccans haven't said which group that is, but the Danes have said that that group may be Islamic State.
It's disgusting, and it's beyond horrific for that to happen. I'm talking about it today because of how I closed out yesterday's programme, which I kind of closed out in a hurry because I wanted to talk. I'm not going to get into it into great detail now, but I wanted to talk about how radical Islam as the great terror facing Western civilization is an idea that was developed in the wake of the collapse of the Soviet Union. It's an idea, this radical Islam, and how terrifying it is. An idea developed by the deep state to replace communism and to replace Russia. Ironically, because now Russia is coming back as the great terror threat of the future. But leave that aside for 1 minute. Radical Islam and what it meant for civil society and what it meant for Western democracies was promoted as the biggest threat to us all, obviously in the wake of September the 11th. And I talked about this last night, but I ran out of time. Right? What you see today is the widespread exploitation of this disgusting story by those on the far right who use the same terminology, the same language all the time to talk about integration and multiculturalism. They will say things like, you see, this is what multiculturalism does, which is specious reasoning to say the least, because this happened in Morocco, where the majority of people in that country are Muslims. Now, I've travelled briefly, but travelled in that country and was amazed by the people I met there and amazed by the way they live. So you're going to get all of that. People sharing it around and talking about, look, this is what's happening. It's happening here in this country. It's happening in the UK. It's happening in Ireland. It's happening in Europe. This is what's happening. And this is how it's being presented. And of course, this is how it's being misrepresented. Because radical Islam is not the biggest threat that the world faces right now, or anything like it. Radical Islam is a figment of the imagination of the deep state, which is responsible for the things that we see happening in Yemen and in Syria and in Libya and all those other places. Some of this I said last night, so I am kind of repeating myself, but I think it bears repeating again. When you find extremists, and you find them in Saudi Arabia and you find them elsewhere, and they are a tiny, tiny minority, but when you help them grow by arming them, of course, and by training them and by giving them the oxygen they need, you do get these atrocities. They are terrible. They are dreadful. They are unspeakable. I saw some of these videos years ago. I don't even want to talk about it. It's not something I would ever willingly click on again to watch it. It is beyond, it's subhuman what these animals will do. But they're not representing Islam. They're not. No more than George H.W. Bush was representing Christianity. This God-fearing Bible basher Bush, as he was during the campaign, as all US politicians are. Are they representative of Christians when they're signing documents and signing off on incursions and bombing campaigns and invasions of countries in the Middle East that result in millions of people dying? Do we say that Christianity is a massive threat to Eastern civilization? Do we say that? No, we don't. People have to understand this. We've got to get beyond this nonsense, the exploitation of these things. You can't ignore that one part of the migration shift that we've seen because of Western policies in the Middle East. One very worrying trend is that among the massive amount of people, the huge groundswell of people coming into Europe, among those are some bad bastards. But they're not Muslims. They're not. They are trained, armed, and supported radical Wahhabists who have direct links, many of them, most of them, to Western intelligence agencies. This is the Kalergi plan, but it's on steroids. It's the divide and conquer agenda. So that the far right can scream at how we're all in terrible mortal danger from this. And people have to be a bit more clever about it. What happened in Morocco yesterday, what happens on those ISIS videos that are on the internet and will probably be on the internet forevermore, those horrendous videos of people being burned alive, all those things that these ISIS guys do, it isn't radical Islam. It isn't evidence that Islam itself has a plan to take over the world. Said this last night. It's short, it's lazy thinking. It's lazy, it's intellectually lazy. It's intellectually redundant, actually. But more and more people seem to be falling for it and relying on it. Yes, it's dreadful that there has been a political denial of the problems in some Asian communities in this country. It is a problem that the police were reluctant to investigate some groups of young Pakistani men who have raped, defiled, and in some cases tortured young white girls. Of course, it's dreadful. Don't ignore it. Don't paper over it. Don't pretend it hasn't happened. It's a dreadful thing. But some of these men are going to mosques funded by Saudi Arabia. We've heard from imams of regular mosques. There have been mosques in this country for decades and in other parts of Europe. We've heard from regular imams who've said this is crazy. Some of the stuff being spoken about and preached at some of these Saudi mosques is a terrible thing. But who's listening to the regular moderate type imams that are saying this and have been saying this for years? Not only are the police not listening to them, but the UK's media will not put them on the air because the media is complicit in fostering this narrative that the Islam is trying to take over. It isn't. It isn't. It is the same cabal that has been manipulating public opinion for centuries that is responsible for things like what happened in Morocco overnight and what is happening in Syria. The vast majority of people leaving Syria, running for their lives, would no more pick up a knife and decapitate somebody than the person living across the street from you. Yes, of course, within that migrant group there are bad guys, as I've said, don't deny it. But don't fall for the us versus them narrative. Don't be divided and conquered. By all means, stand up and speak out about immigration, which I do on this programme and will continue to do. Open door policies and unfettered immigration is madness. It's insane. It has to be stopped because of what it does to the poorest people in our communities. It drives wages down. It destroys working conditions. It gives corporations who have abused people for generations anyway power and access to abuse the indigenous population by paying low wages to that migrant population. Of course, I will talk about that till I am blue in the face. But don't fall for this us versus them Muslim thing. Don't fall for it. You're far too clever for that. Don't follow the Tommy Robinsons of this world and his ilk. They are wrong. They couldn't be more wrong about what's really going on, in my opinion. The US Justice Department has indicted 2 Chinese men accused of hacking into the computer networks of companies and government agencies in Western countries. The men are allegedly part of a hacking group known as Advanced Persistent Threat 10. Wow. And apparently the group is affiliated with China's main intelligence service. They haven't been arrested, of course, because they're in China. The UK, Australia, Canada, Japan, the Netherlands, New Zealand and Sweden were also reportedly targeted by this Chinese group. Here's Sky News reporter Roland Manthorpe with the story. Is this just more China and Russia bashing? Have a listen.
Yes, exactly. So the UK and the US have basically accused this group of hackers of conducting a massive long-term industrial espionage campaign against companies in Europe, in the US, in the UK, working with the Chinese government. And details are still coming out about this. But what we know so far is that at least 45 American companies were targeted, including, for instance, the Department of Energy's National Lab and NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab. And the UK and the US are basically accusing this group of hackers of cracking into these labs, stealing their trade secrets, and then taking them back to China to be used by Chinese companies looking to leap ahead of their Western rivals. And this is really, you know, in the sort of diplomacy of this whole thing, this is really quite a big move by the UK and the US to name China like this.
To name China like this. Any proof? Did any UK-based journalist today ask for proof? Like, can you prove this? Can you prove it? No, they don't. They repeat. They regurgitate. They swallow. It repeats on them and then they regurgitate it. Do you know who's sick of this? The journalist John Pilger is sick of it. The media going along with the officialdom, creating the new Cold War, demonising Russia and China. Journalists are complicit in it. John Pilger was speaking to RT's Going Underground. This programme goes out on Saturday. Here's a snippet from it. Pilger is pretty pissed off.
I've never known such a grotesque absurdity as the elevation of Russia and China and the perceived enemies to the kind of Cold War status they had when I was a child. Having grown up in the Cold War, I find it quite difficult to believe that journalists, some of them distinguished in their own, not many, but award-winning journalists, distinguished in their own right, should go along, should allow themselves to be indulged by the British government at a time when there is a litany of lies about Russia, about China, about so many issues.
Brilliant from Pilger. That programme, RT's Going Underground, this coming Saturday. Finally for today, the UK risks sleepwalking into becoming a cashless society with millions of people disadvantaged as a result, a study concluded. This made the news yesterday, but I didn't get time to get to it last night. This is massive. Banknotes and coins are a necessity for 8 million people, according to the Access to Cash study. The report, which was authored by ex-financial ombudsman Natalie Seeney, said a cash-free society would create problems for those in debt or living in rural areas. We've been saying this for years. Cash use has halved in the past 10 years, with notes and coins now handed over in 3 in every 10 transactions. Cash use is forecast to halve again in the next decade. An old friend of this programme's is G. Edward Griffin. Here is Ed speaking very eloquently about what's going to happen if we go cashless.
So there are different kinds of cashless societies, but the one we're talking about today, that the ones that the politicians are talking about and the ones that the bankers are talking about is not that. It's totally different. It means centrally planned. It means centrally controlled by the government, and all of the cashless digits or whatever they are in the banks. That's what it means. Now, that is of great concern because the banks and the governments are partners in this. It means that you and I and everybody, we don't have any cash anymore. So if the government says you owe the government half of your wealth, you don't have to write a check for it. They just take it out of your account. You have no control over it. Or if they say, we're going to confiscate all of your money because you violated the law, they just take it and you're out. You can't, if they close down your cashless account, you can't buy groceries, you can't buy gasoline, you can't pay rent. In other words, you're out, brother. You're out on the streets, you see. So it means of ultimate control.
I couldn't explain that any better myself. That was Ed Griffin speaking to World Alternative Media to give them their credit. Dear listener, if we go cashless, Honestly, I'm not exaggerating. This is not fear porn. If we go cashless, we are fucked.
What? Proper fucked. You got that, London.
Proper fucked. Proper fucked is right. Look, that's it for the programme. Covered quite a bit there, I think. Thanks for putting up with me today. Like I said, I had very little time to put this together today. Got back to the studio at 3 p.m. having run around all morning, spent hours in a garage with my car, trying to get a few things done for Christmas. But it's been an interesting hour, I think. Thanks for listening to it. We covered quite a lot in it. I want to, if you're not going to be joining me live on Sunday morning, I want to say Merry Christmas to you, all right? Because you might be running around on Sunday the 23rd. I will be live with the programme on Sunday at 11 a.m. The last one of 2018. We'll have a few laughs, I think, on Sunday morning. We'll have a bit of a chat. We'll have some music. We'll have some laughs. And that will be the final one. Thanks for listening today. This will be on Podomatic real soon. YouTube, iTunes and Spotify. And that's it. Until Sunday, enjoy your weekend. Enjoy the rest of the week and the weekend. I look forward to Sunday, by the way. Look after yourselves and one another. I'm going to leave you with Bruce. A little bit of Bruce. Bruce the Boss Springsteen. A song called This Life, dedicated to Jean Ann Crowley. I mentioned this already. She had a big birthday the other day, on Tuesday in fact. Happy birthday, our kid. See you Sunday.